12 best countries to retire inexpensively in 2026. Every year, the same short list of countries gets passed around retirement forums and expat Facebook groups. Portugal, Spain, Mexico, Costa Rica. And sure, those are legitimate options. But in 2026, several of them are no longer the bargains they once were. Rents in Lisbon are up more than 40% since 2020. Parts of Mexico City feel like Austin with worse traffic. The crowd has caught up, and the prices have followed. What most people miss is that the map of genuinely affordable retirement destinations is considerably wider than that short list suggests. There are EU member states where a couple can live well on under $1,500 a month. There are countries offering one-year visa-free stays renewable by a short trip across a border. There are places on the Mediterranean coast where you can buy a stone house for under $100,000. And as you'll see, our top pick combines a flat tax on foreign pensions, Adriatic coastlines, and property prices that would make most Western Europeans genuinely envious. This list covers 12 countries and regions, ranked from solid options down to the single most compelling retirement destination available in 2026. We have looked at monthly cost of living, rental and property prices, residency pathways, climate, healthcare access, and the honest downsides that most relocation channels prefer not to mention. Keep in mind, the figures presented here are approximations meant to give you a sense of the cost of living. Always verify with up-to-date sources before making any decisions. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Number 12. Paphos, Cyprus. Paphos sits on the southwestern tip of Cyprus, an island in the eastern Mediterranean that has been drawing British retirees for decades. The connection runs deep. Cyprus was a British colony until 1960, and English remains genuinely functional here in a way it simply is not in most of southern Europe. Road signs, menus, banks, government offices, most daily interactions can be handled without a word of Greek. The climate is warm for most of the year, with over 300 days of sunshine annually. EU membership gives residents access to the European health system framework, and Cyprus operates a low non-domicile tax regime that is attractive for those with foreign income or investments. Moreover, the island has a small but well-established expat community, particularly around Paphos and Limassol. Monthly costs for a comfortable lifestyle run roughly $1,700 to $1,900 all in for a couple, though a single retiree living modestly can get close to the lower end of the $1,400 to $2,100 range. Rent for a one-bedroom in the Paphos town center sits between $700 and $1,100 a month. Entry-level property starts around $180,000 and can reach $320,000 for something well located. The formal permanent residence by investment program requires a property purchase of at least €300,000 plus proof of roughly €50,000 per year in passive income, which places it firmly in the higher budget bracket. On the downside, the island is politically divided. Northern Cyprus remains a separate, unrecognized entity, and that divide is a real and ongoing fact of daily life in ways that can feel jarring to newcomers. And while the winter climate is mild, summer in Paphos regularly hits 38 degrees Celsius and above. For retirees accustomed to Northern European or North American weather, that level of heat can be a serious adjustment. Number 11. Medellín, Colombia. Medellín sits in a high mountain valley in northwest Colombia at around 1,500 meters above sea level. That altitude gives it one of the most consistently pleasant climates on the planet, ranging between 16 and 26 degrees Celsius year-round with no air conditioning needed. It is the kind of city that earns the nickname it has had for years, the City of Eternal Spring. The metro system is modern, clean, and actually functional, which is not something you can say about most cities in this price bracket. Private healthcare here is world-class by Latin American standards and noticeably cheap. A specialist consultation that might cost $300 in the US runs closer to $30 to $60 here. Additionally, the food scene is excellent, the expat community has grown considerably, and the city has real infrastructure in place for foreign residents. Monthly costs run between $900 and $1,500 all in, with rent for a one-bedroom in the center coming in at $500 to $900 a month. Property starts around $80,000 at entry level. For residency, Colombia's M11 migrant pensioner visa requires proof of a pension of at least $900 per month. A digital nomad visa is also available with a lower income threshold of $684 per month. That said, the most well-known expat neighborhood, El Poblado, has seen tourist zone prices surge more than 50% since 2022. If you budget based on older figures found on expat forums, you will likely be surprised when you arrive. Income inequality in the city is visible in ways that take some adjustment. And the altitude of 1,500 meters can be a real physical consideration for retirees with certain cardiovascular or respiratory conditions. Number 10. Marrakech and Essaouira, Morocco. Morocco often gets overlooked in retirement conversations because it does not fit neatly into either the European or the tropical category. But it deserves serious consideration. Marrakech and Essaouira represent two distinct ends of the Moroccan experience. Marrakech is vibrant, chaotic, culturally overwhelming in the best sense, and inland. Essaouira is a windswept, fortified Atlantic coastal town with a slower pace and cooler temperatures year-round. From most European capitals, you are looking at a 3-hour flight. The cost of living outside the Medina tourist zones is genuinely low. Monthly costs for a couple sit between $800 and $1,300 all in. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center ranges from $400 to $750 a month. Entry-level property starts around $80,000 and reaches $200,000 for something more polished. Residency is handled through the carte de séjour, an initial 1-year permit that becomes a 10-year renewable residence card. You need proof of income and a clean record, but the income threshold is not punishingly high. The honest downside is language. French or Arabic is essential for anything outside the tourist core. Unlike Cyprus or Portugal, Morocco does not have an English-speaking infrastructure, and daily life will require at least basic French to navigate effectively. Furthermore, summer heat in inland Marrakech is extreme, touching 45 degrees Celsius in peak months. Coastal Essaouira is considerably more comfortable in summer, but infrastructure across the country can be inconsistent, particularly in terms of utilities and internet reliability outside cities. Number 9. Da Nang and Hoi An, Vietnam. Vietnam's central coast represents one of Asia's true bargains for retirees willing to manage the visa situation creatively. Da Nang is a modern city with a long sandy beach, decent infrastructure, and real urban amenities. Hoi An, just 30 kilometers south, is a UNESCO-listed ancient town of lantern-lit streets, tailor shops, and exceptionally good food. The two towns together offer a lifestyle that would be difficult to replicate for the price anywhere in the world. Monthly costs sit between $700 and $1,200 all in. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center runs from $400 to $700 a month. Entry-level property starts around $80,000, though the property situation deserves careful attention. Foreigners cannot own land outright. Ownership is limited to a 50-year leasehold structure, and the legal framework for foreign buyers is something to approach with a specialist lawyer before any transaction. On the residency side, Vietnam does not have a formal retirement visa. Full stop. Retirees here operate on 1 to 3 month tourist visas, often with periodic border runs or visa renewals. Business and investor visas are an alternative pathway, but both require paperwork, planning, and some tolerance for bureaucratic unpredictability. For retirees who want a simple, stable legal status, Vietnam is not the easiest option. But for those willing to navigate the complexity, the cost of living advantage over virtually any European or Latin American destination is hard to argue with. Number 8. Lisbon, Portugal. Lisbon remains one of the most livable capital cities in southern Europe. The Atlantic light, the tram routes, the 7 hills, the food, the tiles. It is genuinely one of Europe's most characterful cities, and English is widely spoken across the board. EU residency access, world-class public healthcare, and a mild climate all add to a package that still draws thousands of Western retirees each year. The D7 passive income visa requires proof of approximately €870 per month in passive income, broadly aligned with Portugal's annual minimum wage figure. That is one of the more accessible income thresholds in the EU. Monthly costs in Lisbon run from $1,700 to $2,500 for a couple, with one-bedroom rent in the centre now sitting between $1,100 and $1,800 a month. Entry-level property ranges from $220,000 to $380,000. Here is the thing though. Lisbon is no longer the overlooked gem it was 5 years ago. Rents have surged more than 40% since 2020. The tourist saturation in the historic centre is real and relentless from spring through autumn. And the non-habitual resident tax regime, which was the single biggest financial incentive drawing foreign retirees, was closed to new applicants in 2024. Lisbon is still a fine city to retire in. It is simply no longer the exceptional value proposition it once was, which is precisely why it sits at number 8 rather than higher on this list. Number 7. Kotor and Budva, Montenegro. Montenegro is one of the most scenically dramatic countries in Europe. The Bay of Kotor is a fjord-like inlet of the Adriatic surrounded by grey limestone mountains dropping almost vertically to the water. Kotor itself is a walled medieval town that is legitimately stunning. Budva, just down the coast, offers a more modern, livelier atmosphere with beaches and a growing restaurant scene. The country uses the euro despite not being an EU member, which simplifies finances considerably for European retirees. More importantly, Montenegro is an EU candidate country with accession expected around 2028, which means buying in now, before membership, carries a degree of strategic interest. Monthly costs sit between $900 and $1,400 all in. Rent for a one-bedroom runs from $500 to $900 a month. Entry-level property starts around $120,000. Residency is available through temporary residence tied to property ownership or company formation, renewable annually. The healthcare infrastructure, however, is limited compared to EU member states. This is not a country where you want to need complex specialist care without either medical evacuation insurance or the funds to travel to Serbia, Slovenia, or Italy for treatment. Additionally, the summer months bring a significant tourism influx that pushes local prices noticeably upward. The off-season, from October through May, is when the real value and the real atmosphere of Montenegro emerges. Number 6. Porto, Portugal. Porto is, by most measures, about 25% cheaper than Lisbon. The same D7 passive income visa applies, the same Atlantic climate, the same EU access and public healthcare framework. But Porto carries a different energy. It is a working, industrial, historically rich city built along the Douro River, without quite as much of the tourist saturation that has hollowed out parts of Lisbon's centre. Monthly costs run from $1,400 to $2,000 for a couple. Rent for a one-bedroom in the centre sits between $800 and $1,300 a month. Property entry level starts around $160,000 and reaches $280,000. The expat community has grown considerably over the past 3 years, and English is widely spoken among younger residents and in most commercial settings. That said, winters in Porto are a genuine consideration. The city sits at the mouth of the Douro in the northwest of Portugal, and from November through February it is frequently cold, damp, and grey in a way that catches retirees from warmer climates off guard. Furthermore, rental availability has been tightening fast as the city's popularity rises. The window of genuinely comfortable affordability in Porto is still open, but it is narrower than it was 2 or 3 years ago, and there is no particular reason to expect it to widen. Number 5. Abruzzo, Italy. Abruzzo is the region of Italy that most people have never heard of, which is largely the point. It sits on the central Adriatic coast, bounded by the Apennine Mountains to the west and a long stretch of sandy coastline to the east. You can ski in the morning and be on a beach by the afternoon, which is not a marketing line. It is an accurate description of the geography. Monthly costs run from $1,100 to $1,700 all in for a couple. Rent for a one-bedroom sits between $450 and $800 a month. Property here is where the numbers become genuinely striking. Entry-level property starts around $40,000 in hilltop villages, and houses under €50,000 are not difficult to find if you are willing to take on some renovation work. For residency, the elective residency visa applies, requiring proof of passive income sufficient to support oneself. Abruzzo also qualifies for Italy's 7% flat tax on foreign pension income for retirees who move to qualifying smaller towns, which is one of the most financially powerful retirement incentives in the EU. On the downside, Abruzzo sits in an earthquake-prone zone. This is not a trivial consideration, and buildings should be checked for seismic compliance before purchase. The region is also genuinely rural, and international connectivity via train or major airport is limited compared to Rome or Milan. For retirees who need to travel back to the US or UK frequently, the logistics require planning. Number 4. Tbilisi, Georgia. Georgia, the country, not the US state, is perhaps the single most underrated relocation destination in the world right now. Tbilisi is a city of church-topped hills, sulfur baths, wine that predates French viticulture by thousands of years, and an old town that feels genuinely unlike anywhere else in Europe or Asia. The food culture is exceptional. The city is noticeably safe. And the cost of living is low in a way that stops you in your tracks. Monthly costs sit between $700 and $1,200 all in. Rent for a one-bedroom runs from $400 to $700 a month. Entry-level property starts around $60,000. Now here is the residency situation, and it is remarkable. Citizens of 95 or more countries can stay in Georgia visa-free for up to 1 full year. That is renewable by a short border run. For those wanting longer-term status, property purchase or business registration opens a more formalized pathway. Furthermore, Georgia operates a 1% income tax rate for sole proprietors operating as individual entrepreneurs, applicable on turnover under $155,000 per year. For remote workers or early retirees with some freelance or business income, that tax rate is extraordinarily competitive. However, Georgia is not an EU member and is not currently on a realistic path to accession. Regional tensions along the Russian border are a genuine factor worth keeping in mind when making long-term relocation decisions. And outside the expat circles of Vera and Vake in Tbilisi, daily life runs in Georgian script and Russian, with English uncommon enough to require some patience. Number 3. Cluj-Napoca, Romania. Cluj-Napoca sits in the Transylvania region of northwestern Romania and is consistently one of the most overlooked EU destinations for retirees and remote workers alike. It is one of Eastern Europe's largest technology hubs, which means the city skews younger, more internationally connected, and more English-speaking than most Romanian cities. The cost of living is considerably below the Western European average, but the EU membership status, the healthcare access, and the 10% flat income tax rate bring significant advantages that non-EU destinations further down the list cannot match. Monthly costs sit between $800 and $1,300 all in for a couple. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center runs from $450 to $750 a month. Entry-level property starts around $80,000 and reaches $160,000. For retirees, a long-stay visa pathway exists. A digital nomad visa is also available for those with foreign income of at least €3,950 per month. Savvy investors have already started buying property in Cluj in anticipation of continued price appreciation as the city grows in international profile. On the downside, Romanian bureaucracy is among the heaviest in the EU. Getting registered, obtaining documents, and navigating any formal process takes patience and frequently requires a local fixer or bilingual lawyer. Winters in Cluj are also genuinely harsh, with regular snowfall and temperatures dropping well below freezing from December through February. Number 2. Athens, Greece. Athens is a city that rewards those willing to look beyond its chaotic surface. The history is incomparable. The food is excellent and inexpensive. Island access from Piraeus is straightforward. And since 2020, Greece has been actively courting foreign retirees with one of the most generous tax incentives in Europe, a 7% flat tax on all foreign pension income for 15 years, available to retirees who transfer their tax residency to Greece. Monthly costs run from $1,200 to $1,800 all in. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center sits between $600 and $1,000 a month. Entry-level property starts around $120,000. The Financially Independent Person visa, known as the FIP visa, requires proof of €3,500 per month in income, which is higher than Portugal's D7 threshold. It is worth noting that Greece's golden visa property threshold was raised to €800,000 in prime areas in 2024, making it significantly less accessible for mid-budget investors. That said, EU permanent residency and eventually a pathway to an EU passport after 7 years of residence remain genuinely powerful long-term incentives. The bureaucracy in Greece is, frankly, among the worst in Europe. Paperwork that should take days takes months. Processes that should be straightforward become circuitous. Anyone relocating to Athens needs a competent local lawyer from the start, not as an optional extra but as a practical necessity. Moreover, Greek is required for most local interactions outside of tourist-facing businesses, and integrating into daily life beyond the expat bubble takes real linguistic effort. Number 1. Puglia, Italy. Puglia is the heel of Italy's boot. It is a region of white stone hilltop towns, olive groves several centuries old, 2 distinct coastlines where the Adriatic meets the Ionian Sea, and a culinary tradition built on genuinely exceptional local produce. Lecce is often called the Florence of the South for its Baroque architecture, and Ostuni, perched on a white hilltop above the Adriatic, is one of the most visually striking towns in the whole of the Mediterranean. Monthly costs run from $1,300 to $1,900 all in for a couple. Rent for a one-bedroom sits between $600 and $1,000 a month. Property here is the part that draws the most attention. Entry-level property starts around $80,000 and reaches $200,000 for something genuinely characterful. Trulli houses, the distinctive conical stone structures of the Vale d'Itria, are still available under €100,000. For residency, the elective residency visa applies, requiring proof of passive income of approximately €31,000 per year. Now here is what makes Puglia the top pick on this list. Italy's 7% flat tax on foreign pension income applies specifically to retirees who move to towns with fewer than 20,000 residents. Puglia has dozens of qualifying towns. For a retiree receiving, say, $60,000 a year in foreign pension income, paying 7% flat rather than standard Italian progressive rates is a saving of potentially thousands of dollars annually, year after year, for up to 10 years under the current scheme. Add in 2 coastlines, sub-$100,000 property options, one of Europe's great regional cuisines, and a pace of life that is genuinely unhurried, and the value case becomes difficult to beat. On the downside, rural infrastructure in southern Italy is noticeably thinner than in the north. Train connections are slow and infrequent outside the main cities. Hospital access for specialist care often means traveling to Bari or Brindisi, and the summer months in beach towns like Otranto and Gallipoli bring significant tourist crowds to areas that are blissfully quiet the rest of the year. But for retirees willing to accept those trade-offs, and plan their healthcare access accordingly, Puglia in 2026 offers something that almost no other destination on this list can fully match. And there you have it! 12 of the best countries and regions to retire inexpensively in 2026. From Morocco's Medinas and Georgia's sulfur bath alleyways all the way to Puglia's Baroque hilltop towns and Adriatic coastline, the options genuinely are wider than most people realize. The short list the internet keeps recycling is not wrong, it is just incomplete. If you found this useful, consider subscribing. We cover destinations like this every week, and there is a great deal more ground to cover. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.